Morning. I hope you're all doing okay. I hope you enjoyed the football last night, if that's your thing. Appreciate it might not be for everyone, but certainly it got tenser and tenser, didn't it, as the night went on, and then I couldn't sleep for a bit. So this morning, talking all about role models, and I just thought I would start with this quote from Marian Wright Edelman. She was an educator over in the US, and this is, I think, sums up for me why role models are so important. We cannot be what we cannot see. So before I start talking about role models, I thought it would be interesting if we just head into chat. Let me know any role models that you've had in your career so far. And they don't have to be people who are necessarily from a professional capacity. If you've listened to the podcast already this week, you know Helen and I gave quite a few different examples. I'm going to talk about some more examples. But if you've got any you're prepared to share in chat, just pop them in. Doesn't matter that people might not know who those people are. Sometimes they might recognize some of the names, but I thought it would be interesting to get a bit of a view for everybody's different role models. Morning, everyone. We just had an influx of people, perhaps all coming in a couple of minutes past. Kim, that's very kind. I now feel like I was like leading people. That was not what I was trying to get to. I'm just asking everyone, for people who've just joined, just to share in chat any role models you've had in your career. Oh, Lucy, ultra runner, Jasmine Paris. I've not come across her before. I'll have to do a bit of research. Anyone who has got ultra before runner sounds impressive. Leanne, you're like Helen, your nan. Helen's nan's a bit of a role model for her. Bosima St. John. Oh, I don't know that name. Wayne Gretzky. Steve, I'm going to go ice hockey, but I could be wrong. So let me know how I got on with guessing that one. Pro Ironman athlete Joe Skipper. Ironman, always very impressive. Alex Ferguson. Dave, I watched the Alex Ferguson documentary on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's really good. I think I can see Dave nodding to it. Emma Barnett. Adventurer Alistair Humphreys. Yeah, Helen knows Alistair, I think. Caroline Criado Perez, I never know if I'm saying her name right. She's amazing. I'd love to get Caroline on the podcast at some point. I got it right with the old ice hockey. I'm quite impressed with myself there. Someone's friend, lovely, great. It don't have to be people that we necessarily know. Early in your working life, Tanya, I love that. Some really good female managers. Ballerina and an artist, amazing. James Kerr. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. James Hansen, your ex-manager. Lovely. So we can see how important role models are. And I'm interested to get from you. So we didn't talk about this on the podcast this week because we sort of didn't want to we felt this was something where it's okay to talk about as a group, but it was quite difficult in audio to do this in a really concise way with lots of clarity. And since I've thought about it more, I've now got to a better answer. But I would love to know from all of you. Helen and I had a good debate about this and didn't quite reach a good conclusion. What do you think the difference is between mentors and role models? Just let me know in chat. It's an interesting question. You know, we talk about sponsors and mentoring. So, you know, we've talked about that quite recently. And I do think it's useful to kind of think about, well, what's the connection between all these different people that feel so important as part of our career community? Sponsors, role models, mentors. Yeah, great. So you guys have done a better job quicker than Helen and I did in terms of trying to figure out. We didn't want to get caught in too much of an abstract conversation. Yeah, so we got to the same thing when I kind of thought about this a bit more, is that I think role models, mentors, are giving you advice and they are active. So for somebody to be mentoring you, I think, I feel like you would know that person and they will be giving you advice. They'll be playing a really active role in your career. Whereas I feel like role models are kind of people maybe you aspire to, and they're not as active, but they're more about they're inspiring you. Yeah, Kim said inspiring, yeah. And I got to the same, yeah, these are people you know, whereas these are people who you don't necessarily have to know, who you know enough about that they can be inspirational, but you don't have to have that personal connection with. So I think it's interesting. I started to get to a point where you could start to map all these different roles, sponsors, mentors, role models, and I'm sure there are more. And we've thought about some more actually for the relationships chapter for our next book, of like, who are all these important people as part of your career community. So we've just done a better job there than Helen and I did when we first started to think about this. And it's interesting to think about different types of role models. And Fiona Murden, who's written a brilliant book on this, she talks about there are 3 different types of role models. Some of them come from our kind of personal life. So for people saying your nan, you know, your family, your friends. Some are situational. So they're a role model at the moment because of the role that you're doing, maybe the career that you're in. Someone may be saying, you know, if you work in a housing association, or if you work in public sector, perhaps they come from that area, and that's why they're kind of a role model for you. Or they can be kind of fully aspirational, which I guess that's where, unless you work in sport, if you're picking a sports person, or, you know, somebody probably more of like a public figure, it's not because of the specific role or industry you're in. They're just a really inspiring person. So I thought we would use the tick and cross stamps, and I'd love you to tick and cross which ones of these you feel you have and which ones you haven't got, so that we could do almost a bit of a live gap analysis. So the way you'll do this is, if you go to the top of your screen, view options, annotate, stamp, and then you'll be able to put ticks and crosses on the ones that you think you've got, and put crosses on the ones where you feel like you might have gaps. And let's just say it's quite an interesting frame, quite an interesting lens to look at role models through, I think. People are the same as me. I did this exercise yesterday to check it works and makes sense. Mine were here and not as much here, I don't think. But I'll share with you. I've done my role model mood board to share with you today. And maybe here a few more, but most of mine are quite aspirational. And it's interesting to think about, certainly, I think for these 2, most of us are saying we've got these aspirational ones. Perhaps that's because, you know, these people are in the public eye. You can follow them on Instagram, you can read their books, you can watch their documentaries on Netflix. This, to me, feels really important in our squiggly careers, because wherever we find ourselves, and we are likely to move into different contexts, into different situations, it's really helpful to have some role models who can show us the art of the possible. Though I perhaps feel like I've got a few less now, I definitely at one point in my career had quite a few situational role models, and it really accelerated my career in terms of, it gave me confidence, confidence kind of in my ambitions, but also confidence in what I could achieve. And that was from starting to think about, well, where do I spend my time and who am I spending my time with? So I think this is one to really think about. This is perhaps a bit harder to influence. You know, we've got a mixture of kind of ticks and crosses there, but, you know, we don't choose our friends and our family necessarily based on whether they're a role model. But this one, I would really have a think about. And when we talk about 5 ideas for action, think about, how can I get more situational role models as to be part of that career community? So the 5 ideas for action that we talked through on the podcast this week. Oh, I just need to get rid of those ticks and crosses. So 5 things to have a think about. The first one is, what are you missing? So rather than starting with thinking, I need a role model, thinking about what gaps have you got? So what are you looking to have modeled? It's a different way. Rather than starting with the who, you're starting with the what, I guess, is the way that I would kind of think about this. This really helped me. This is a kind of coach yourself question of thinking, well, what do I need modeling that I feel I've got missing at the moment? So let's head into chat and just let's bring that to life with some examples. So let me know what you think you might be missing at the moment that you would like modeling. Oh, Tanya, good question. Do we think as we progress in our careers, we become role models? Of course. And I don't think role models is necessarily about hierarchy either. Sometimes you don't realise you're a role model. I think that's a good observation. Let's see what gaps we've got. So Kim saying leadership, Harjeet saying public speaking confidence. Oh, this is interesting. We can also perhaps help each other a little bit. On public speaking confidence, I would have a look at Viv Groskop. Her podcast, How to Own the Room, and her as an individual. She's really interesting. She's a journalist. She's a stand-up comedian. She's a brilliant podcast. She writes plays for Radio 4. Fiona going freelance. Interesting. I can't remember Alison's surname. She wrote a book, I think it's called The Freelance Bible, worth having a look at. Sarah, perhaps you could have a quick look at that for me and see if you can find it. Thank you. I can see you nodding your head. She'd be a really good person to look at. There's also some really good freelance communities that I will come back to when I remember the names of them. Confidence, Reg says, yeah, business knowledge, a vision into action. Interesting. Yeah, so those people who can take a strategy and turn it into something. Yeah, really good suggestions coming through. Alison Grade, that's right, Freelance Bible. Oh, Steve, good recommendation. Not somebody I've come across. Really good. Again, if you've got suggestions, feel free to put them in chat. Whether it's on things like confidence, if you know, let us know on things like Lucy, when you're saying sector expertise or business knowledge from Megan, if you want to be any more specific, just to see if anyone's got any suggestions for you, please do feel free to add those in. But when I thought about this, I got to something similar. I thought about, well, who are the people that I know who are role models for me, who are running businesses that are kind of small and growing quickly, that I really admire and aspire to. And actually, when I started to think about it, I thought, oh, there are a few, but perhaps I've not really thought about that in a conscious enough way and thought about who those role models might be. How to pitch ideas to businesses as a freelancer. Yes, a few questions about freelancer. Climate change sector, strong leading female scientists. Oh, I was going to have some good suggestions there, Lucy, but they're not. I know they're not scientists. But I have got some suggestions in that sector, but I don't think they're scientists, but they're good communicators. Worth having a look. There's an organisation called Cook who do some really good stuff. I'll tell you where I'd start, Lucy, actually, without knowing who are scientists. I'd look at B corporations, which you probably have already done, but any organisation that's a B Corp probably has scientists and probably has some people who are very good at communicating as well in that area. No problem. Oh, brilliant. Pass the mic in Scotland. Yeah, Megan, great. Lauren Curry is great on confidence. Someone said confidence, and she's very good on D&I as well. My other suggestion on D&I would be The Other Box, Leah Satar and Roshni Gayoti. They've been on our podcast before, actually. I think they talked about allyship on the podcast. Financial literacy within marketing, how to make a name for yourself. Okay, we've got some good answers there, and hopefully some good suggestions from each other, everybody helping each other. In D&I, they're called The Other Box, and it's Leah Satar and Roshni Gayoti. And I'm sure Sarah can maybe add those into chat for us as well. I'll come back to those if there's any that I've said and that we've not got to. Brilliant. Even doing that is quite interesting, isn't it? As soon as you go, this is what I'm missing, I feel like because we've been more specific, it's easier to then almost solve the problem, because you've thought, well, this is what I need, and therefore who can help me, versus who can help me. I think that's a harder and more abstract question. So this is the thing I think is the most useful that you can ask yourself. If you've got that gap in terms of situational, be as specific as possible, really drill down into what modeling am I looking for? Who am I looking to learn? And then you can think, who am I looking to learn from? Next thing, and we talked about this on the podcast, the thing that has probably been most effective when I reflect back on the role models in my career so far, though I really like the missing thing, I think that's the approach that I would take in the future. But actually, when I think about where I found role models, it's often by saying yes to things that don't feel like a priority. And so thinking about, you've got to go and put yourself in places and in spaces where those role models are likely to be spending time. And I had a perfect example this week. So I was at an AGM for something, and I didn't really want to go to the AGM. So if you could just not mention that to anyone else, because I thought, oh, I've got loads of work to do. But the reason I went to the AGM is they got a keynote speaker, and she's called, I think it's Ruby McGregor Smith. I think she's got a double-barreled surname. I think she's got a CBE, so I should probably get that right. And I'd not heard of Ruby's work before. I wasn't familiar with her. Then she started to, they started to then reel off all the things that she does. I think she's a member of the House of Lords. She was one of the few female CEOs of colour. She's done loads of incredible things. She's got a very impressive CV. And then when she started speaking and talking about things that she was passionate about around progression, and particularly progression for everybody and people, early on in their careers, people from very marginalized backgrounds, she was a really, really, really inspiring person. And actually, I didn't realize she did as much work in kind of education and careers as she does, because it was a marketing AGM that I was at. And so that for me was a perfect example of where I did something that I wasn't really sure what I was going to get out of it, but I did think, oh, she'll be interesting to listen to. And I'm not saying she's necessarily a role model yet, because I don't think I know enough about her or her work for her to have got to that point for me. But I feel like she's a potential role model. And straight away, I was like researching her. I was like, oh, I wonder what I could read or what I could follow, how I could learn a bit more about her. And she's an interesting role model from a few perspectives. Yeah, because she's female, but more because of the work that she's done and the things that clearly she's passionate about. I've then found a really interesting report that she did for the government, all about how do you make more equal opportunities available for everybody at work. And I was like, oh, this is fascinating. So I learnt loads, and I potentially found a role model. And I think that's been the same in my career. There's been things, communities I've been part of, events I've gone to, networks that I've joined, where I couldn't have told you before, oh, this is the place to go to get role models, but you're putting yourself in situations, giving yourself the opportunity to almost accidentally discover those role models. We talked about this week, I think this is almost more active and this is more reactive, but you're still taking action to kind of put yourself in those places where you might see role models, which I think is really important. They don't sort of just happen. We can't just expect them to pop up. Maybe they do sometimes, but often. Did I get it right? Did I say Ruby McGregor Smith? I feel like I might have got that right, but you can tell me. So just think about, what are you saying yes to? The other thing I think that is really interesting is think about who are your resilience role models. So for when you have those bumps in the road, whether they are really big bumps or kind of small bumps, I think it's important for us to have in squiggly careers, resilience role models that we can look to when things feel more knotty than squiggly, when we feel more stuck and we maybe feel like we've stalled and we're not making the progress that we were hoping for. And when I think about resilience role models, you come at the question from a different perspective. You might come up with some different answers, some different people, but maybe it's because of the type of adversity they've overcome. Maybe that's similar to you, so you can learn from a similar situation. Maybe it's just because the characteristics that you see in those people you really admire. Maybe they're particularly gritty. Maybe they really persevere and they've had some really big challenges. Also, don't forget, and we made this point this week, you can be your own resilience role model. I do think we sometimes forget in those tough moments that we have also been resilient. And remind yourself, do a bit of what's called in coaching mental time travel, and remind yourself of where you've overcome adversity in the past. Because if you do that, it does two things for you, which are really helpful. One, it gives you confidence you can overcome adversity because you've done it before. It doesn't matter that it's not exactly the same adversity. And secondly, you remind yourself of what strategies, tools, and techniques you've used in the past to help you to make progress. And that might be something that you can use again. So whenever I think about, well, what did I do well in really tough moments in my career and my life? I'm good at asking for help. So it reminds me, okay, well, I've overcome those moments. I'm good at asking for help. What help do I need this time? That's kind of one of the things I can think about. Do I think they are generally people close to us? Not necessarily. I think I learn a lot about resilience from people actually in different walks of life. I think somebody said that as a nice way of describing the difference between role models and mentors. Elizabeth Day, a really good go-to actually for resilience, because of the range of people she's spoken to on her podcast. you just hear lots of people talking about failures and being really resilient. So that's a great suggestion there from Tanya. I've not listened to Jess Phillips yet, but she wrote a really interesting book for something called The Pound Project, which I really like. I watched actually back to documentaries. I watched a documentary about Barack Obama that you just saw how resilient he'd had to be. But I've not read his memoir. Puts things in context. I actually watched a really good, and I can't remember the name of it now, really good documentary about rock climbing. I've got no interest in rock climbing particularly, but they were climbing, I think it was El Capitan. It's certainly one in Yosemite. And he was doing it, he was going a route that like no one has ever done before. And and it took him years. Watching this guy, the perseverance of trying to get to the top of this sheer cliff that looked absolutely ridiculous and really, really hard. But he went through a lot of personal adversity at the same time. Just the gritty determinism that he brought to everything. It was fascinating. I must remember the name of that because it's a really good documentary. So yeah, just think about, you can be your own resilience role models, but also who else can help you do that. And then the last one, which I'm going to show you mine in a second, is don't feel like you are, and I don't think we have done this together as a group this morning, you don't need that. I think it might be free solo. I think that might have been what it was. Don't feel like you have to have a single role model. I think that maybe, we don't actually also say that about mentoring. I think you want to have a range of people so that you get that diversity of thoughts, of perspectives, you get challenged in different ways. And this is where doing a role model mood board, or whatever you want to call it, I think can be really helpful. So when I first started thinking about role models for this week's episode, this was an episode we actually did a lot of preparation for, because it didn't necessarily spring to mind. I had to think a bit more about, well, who are my role models? And this exercise really helped me. So this is my role model mood board. And I was thinking about, well, who are the people that really inspire me? Who do I aspire to? And also thinking about why. What's the role that each of these role models like play for me? Like, what is it that why do I go to them? What is it that they kind of offer? What am I learning from them? So if I just talk about each of these. So this is Maria Popova, who started something called Brain Pickings, a brilliant website. I really love it. It's so thoughtful and considered, and it's really all about kind of curiosity and staying curious. So I really admire her. Actually, I've forgotten, here's Leah and Roshni in here from the other box. I think because they're role models for me, because I feel like they challenge me. So some of these people you do know, like I do know, Leah and Roshni. Natalie here, Natalie's a CEO for a water company called Baloo. And she is very purpose driven, but in a really practical way. I really like how she combines purpose and practice. And lives that every day, and in the choices that she makes and the work that she does. Roman Krznaric, who's a philosopher, and actually his book really influenced me sort of in the early days of Amazing If, starting Amazing If. Wrote a brilliant book all about kind of being curious about the world of work, called Wonderbox. Adam Grant, who most of you will know, and I'm sure we've mentioned Margaret Heffernan a few times. So when I sort of started to do this, these were people that didn't necessarily spring to mind straight away. It took me a bit of time to really reflect about who these people are, the role that they play for me. And then actually, the more I've thought about this, the more I've sat with it, that I think I could almost do another role model mood board that is even more aspirational. These people are all quite close to me, and a bit more, they've influenced my work. Some of them I've actually even spoken to for the podcast. And then I think there's probably even another one that's like people who are further away from my day-to-day. So maybe worth thinking about having a go at doing something a bit like this. You could do it on Pinterest really easily. You could just write down a list of bullet points if that feels more appealing. So that's everything I wanted to go through for today. I just want to do a quick reminder for our Rock Your Profile session that we're doing in a couple of weeks' time. So some of you will have heard me mention this before. LinkedIn have offered, Zara, who works at LinkedIn, she's, I think, head of brand. She's offered to come and join Pod Plus in a few weeks' time on the 29th of July. And she's just going to do half an hour on doing your LinkedIn profile, making it as brilliant as it can possibly be. We mentioned it a couple of weeks ago to see if there was interest. And we got lots of people saying, yeah, we'd really like to do this. So rather than doing it as a separate session, we just thought we'd let Zara do a Pod Plus takeover. So LinkedIn very much, they just do this kind of on the side as part of their supporting communities and supporting people in their careers. So if you wanted to put that, I thought I'd mention it today in case you want to put the date in your diary to particularly make that one if it's important for you. Or you might think that's really not for me. We won't be talking about the podcast topic that week. So you can also think, oh, I've got half an hour free on a Thursday that I don't normally have. If you think I don't need to do that, my profile's already awesome, or that's not how I want to spend 30 minutes on a Thursday morning. Either of those is fine. So I'll stop sharing and just say thank you. I hope you have a good rest of your Thursday. I hope that's been useful. If you do a role model mood board, I'd love to see it. And I will see you all again next week. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye.